And welcome back to the Touchline Talk Show. Thank you so much for tuning in today. It is MLS news and notes time. Some things have happened on the managerial front I want to talk about. Had a round of 32 games in the US Open Cup. Those are also continuing tonight. And we have a US men's national team U-20, it's a tongue twister, World Cup squad that was just announced this afternoon. So starting with the managerial changes. Gerhard Struber out, New York Red Bulls. This just sped up what was inevitably going to happen because Struber wanted to be back in Europe, back with his family. So this was going to end one way or another. It just ended a little bit earlier than it was supposed to. Here is the thing to keep in mind with coaches. And I first heard this philosophy from ESPN's Bomani Jones, so I want to give him credit, and I've taken it and run with it. Coaches, you're either going to look for reasons to get rid of them or reasons to keep them. Right? If the front office likes a coach, they're going to go to bat for that coach and find any way they can to keep them. If there are external forces pushing that coach out, it's going to be much easier to let them go, right? There aren't many coaches who have to be fired or who have to stay. A lot of it is kind of personal preference based on the situation. And Gerhard Struber did not give the New York Red Bulls any reason to keep him. From the totally understandable personal choice to, right, he wanted to be closer to his family. So it's not like he was committed, he wanted to be there for the next decade, which is certainly not a reason to fire anybody. That's not why he got fired. But again, it's another circumstance that is in the favor of making this decision. And then you've got the actual two big reasons why this happened. They've been awful. Right? So you're not going to bat for this coach probably believing that he's the guy to get you out of this and that you should stick with him. And then, of course, the big one is the Dante Van Zier situation and how he handled it. People have been calling for him to be fired, and for good reason, since that happened. So you have everything going against you. In order to keep your job, you've got to deliver on the field. And that just wasn't happening. So Struber made it, for a variety of reasons, made this really easy for the Red Bulls. There was just no reason to keep him. And he was, this was a mutual agreement. He was happy to leave too. It was time to just cut ties and try and start this over when you have enough time to salvage the season. That's the other part of this. They have been injured, and that needs to be acknowledged. Luquinhas and Lewis Morgan, who was great last season. And then, of course, I was talking preseason about, can Dante Van Zier be the guy to elevate the Red Bulls from a playoff team to a team that could actually make some noise in the playoffs, that you feel like is at least some kind of dark horse contender. And then Dante Van Zier excuses himself by doing what he did. So now you're out him and two of your other most important players. And you lost Aaron Long. That's all working against this too. That needs to be part of the story here. So if you can get somebody in, if you can get these guys back, and you can stay healthy, I do think there's a chance to salvage this and at least make a run at getting into the playoffs. And if you get in, who knows what happens. But if they weren't headed down that path the way this was going with Struber, I would have had no problem with him being fired for his handling of the Van Zier situation. I was really irritated with the lack of accountability. But they decided to keep him at least a little while. Now he is gone. There is enough time to turn this thing around. I still generally believe in this roster that it's, not where they are in the table is not reflective of the team that they have. But you are running out of time. So it's going to be, and the other part of this too is, since you made this decision now, there are going to be some coaches that become available here when the European season ends. So doing this as early as you can was the smart choice. It should have happened even earlier, but Gerhard Struber out at the New York Red Bulls. The other coaching decision, a little bit more surprising one, Ezra Hendrickson gone from the Chicago Fire. And this is, again, a really good example of what I was just talking about, where you can kind of paint this any way you want. You can look at it and say, they haven't been particularly good, right? They've blown some leads. They should be higher in the table. There's nothing to really indicate they're going in the right direction, and that Hendrickson is making them better. Or, if you want to believe in Hendrickson, you look at it and say, they've lost by multiple goals once. They have not lost at home. Now, 5 of those 6 games at home have been draws. To the right, they're close, but they're just not kind of finishing. And the designated players aren't doing what they need to do, which is the biggest problem of all. And that's not on the coach, generally speaking. Once they're on yes, the coach plays a role. But that's a personnel thing. That's a front office thing. But it's easier to remove the coach, so when things are disappointing, that's where everybody goes, whether it's right or wrong. I'm an Ezra Hendrickson fan. To me, he deserved a lot more time. To me, there was progress here, and they weren't all that far out from a playoff spot. It wasn't a disastrous start. They're just missing that final piece to actually put together some wins, because they've been competitive. I would argue they have been noticeably better this season. But you've won 1 out of 6 home games. You're also unbeaten at home, but you've won 1 out of your 6 home games. Right? They need to pick up points at a much better rate, and it wasn't happening with Hendrickson. But to me, this is more about the roster and about him not being given what he needs to succeed. And so it's easy to point the finger at him and to make the managerial change, as opposed to addressing the issues that are going to continue to plague this team because they're just not good enough. This one was disappointing for me. I thought he had done some good things. And I applaud him for kind of going to bat for himself in the statement he sent out afterward by basically saying we were headed in the right direction and sticking by what he was doing there. I believe he has every right to do that. But the results weren't there, so Chicago makes the move as well. So we've already got a couple MLS openings early in the season. Going to be interesting to see how quickly these get filled. And, these are 2 teams that aren't in kind of rebuild mode. These are 2 teams trying to take it to another level. And now you're taking a step back and kind of starting over with a new coach. We'll see how that all turns out in New York and in Chicago. Always want to give a shout out to the U.S. Open Cup as well. Not as many upsets on night 1 of the round of 32, but some phenomenal games. This tournament always delivers. I will continue to say people need to care about this. This needs to become a bigger deal within U.S. soccer. It's a phenomenal event. And we haven't even completed the round of 16 and figuring out who those 16 teams are. And there are plenty of what you would consider, MLS favorites, teams near the top of the table in both conferences who are already out. Starting with the New England Revolution, who lost at home to the Pittsburgh Riverhounds. Then that was your big upset, and yes, there are always caveats about what squad went out there and all of that. Who actually played some guys, who didn't, there's context that's important. But part of this is when you are, for example, in Orlando City last season, right? When you're one of these teams that probably aren't going to win MLS Cup, this becomes another trophy you can win. And so every round you advance, you're also looking to see, okay, how many teams left are you actually scared of? Right? Are LAFC, Seattle, the Union, Cincinnati, and the Revs all still in this thing by the quarterfinals? Or are there one or two teams that you feel like are elite MLS teams that would, once they start taking this competition seriously and putting out a best 11 kind of thing, you don't like your chances against? So the Revs are the best team in the Eastern Conference so far. Gone. Philadelphia Union. Gone. Now, this was quite a game. Minnesota United are the team to knock out the Union. Minnesota go 2-0 up. The Union get a goal back. Kai Wagner scores with essentially the last kick of the game to send it to extra time. Minnesota go ahead again. Kai Wagner scores with the last kick of extra time to send it to a penalty shootout. And the game was ultimately decided when Kai Wagner's penalty gets saved. It was everything you want a U.S. Open Cup game to be. Wild, unlikely heroes, all kinds of, Chris Donovan scores his first goal for the Union. Unexpected contributors, guys coming off the bench, scoring all the goals. It was just pure entertainment. Right, so now you're looking, okay, the Union are gone, the Revs are gone. And LAFC nearly lost to Monterey Bay FC. Except Eldin Jupukovic saved, came up big in the penalty shootout and converted the penalty of his own. And so LAFC do survive as they're trying to, capture every trophy available. But they almost lost in the round of 32 as well. And we haven't even gotten to the second set of games in the round of 32. This is already, yes, you're not going to have, last season there were all these USL League One teams, and obviously you had the Sacramento Republic getting all the way to the final. It doesn't look like we're going to have the same kind of upsets this season. There'll always be some, but not as many as we saw last year. But this is opening up very, very quickly for some MLS team is going to be able to kind of redefine their season by this tournament. And that's always one of my favorite things is, right, it's an FA Cup run from, the example would be Brighton, except for Brighton got bigger things to play for at this point. When Watford got there, when, was it Wigan won the FA Cup the year they got relegated? I think that's who it was. That it's something to hold on to and something to get excited about in a season that's not gone particularly well. And so all these teams that keep advancing, as your MLS favorites get knocked out, we could have a really, really fun kind of quarterfinal, semifinal, final of teams that are going to really, really care about this because it's a trophy that's within their grasp. Whereas, the Revs have bigger things to worry about, quite frankly. Yes, they would have liked to advance. The Union would have liked to advance. They're trying to, home field advantage in the playoffs, supporters shield, winning the Eastern Conference, all that kind of stuff. So I always want to see the teams that take this really, really seriously and place a lot of value on it succeed. And it's setting up to be a very interesting season in that regard. The other thing I want to mention real quickly before we get out of here today is this U.S. men's national team U-20 World Cup squad. Some of the players in it, one noticeable one who was not. You've got 10 MLS clubs represented with plenty of guys that have legitimate MLS experience. Some of your notable names in here, Gaga is in net. Chelsea have very little use for him at this moment in time, so they let him go. Caleb Wiley has had a really good season for Atlanta. He's on this squad. Daniel Edelman, I've been really impressed with him with the Red Bulls. He's there. Kevin Paredes from Wolfsburg is there. Obed Vargas of the Seattle Sounders is there. You've got your Philadelphia Union trio. Jack McGlynn, Brandon Craig. I'm blanking on the third one. Quinn Sullivan. who, Clint Sullivan was one of the best players during CONCACAF qualifying. There was a fourth Union player in this quartet of guys who helped this team qualify. Oh, Kate Cowell, also forgot to mention him from San Jose, right? Legit MLS players. This is not the best team the U.S. could have sent, but a very, very good one in terms of getting some of the biggest names. And also Joshua Widener from Louisville City, who I'm really high on as well. There's a lot of exciting names on this team. The one guy who isn't there, who was so good during qualifying, is Paxton Aaronson. Frankfurt wouldn't let him go. Which, on one hand, is a really good sign for Paxton Aaronson's career that Frankfurt didn't want to let him go for this. Because that means, and he's been getting at least some minutes in the Bundesliga, that they want him to be part of the rest of the season. That also means you're missing a very, very, very good player for this team who was excellent, helped him qualify, and is missing out on this opportunity that who knows if he's going to get something like this again. So there's kind of this double-edged sword with it that teams have to agree to release these players for this competition. Generally, that wasn't a big deal. The MLS teams, for the most part, were amenable to that. As you've seen all of these MLS guys listed on the roster. Not every single team, but most of them. And I think I saw Jim Kern say something about, I'm not going to be the guy who denies them this opportunity, basically. What are we doing if we just tell them they can't play in this? So that's very good to see. The flip side is, though, that means you're getting guys who teams have agreed to let go, such as Gaga Slonina. Now, Slonina is going to get his future sorted out next season anyway. It's not like, it's just a weird situation he was in. So, absolutely, you let him go. He's not going to play right now. He's not going to be playing for Chelsea next season either. So that makes all the sense in the world. It gets a little dicier with a guy like Paxton Aaronson who's actually getting some minutes. Would you have hoped Frankfurt would have said, you know what, it's just not the worst thing in the world if we're going to be without him for these last few games? Yeah, I would have really liked to see him in this tournament. But the flip side is, that means they value him. So you can spin that one kind of both ways. But ultimately, I really do like this roster. I just love the young MLS guys that have legit MLS experience. Jack McGlynn's basically taking a starting spot with the Union. Kate Cowell's been really good for San Jose. Caleb Wiley's been sensational, like I said, for Atlanta. I've liked what I've seen from Daniel Edelman. You can go down the list. There's a lot of experienced guys even at this U-20 level. And they were really, really good during qualifying, and they were really fun to watch. So you get another opportunity with this group. Be sure to check that out. I believe the tournament starts May 20th. Don't quote me on that, but I believe that's when it gets underway. So it's coming up here soon. And so just be sure to keep an eye on this U-20 World Cup. You don't get one of these every day. This is the future of the U.S. men's national team, at least to a certain extent, kind of your next group of stars. And they feature many recognizable names if you follow MLS.